Invisible Value Vivian Mitchell arrived at the offices of Hawthorne Enterprises at precisely 7:30 a.m., just as she had every workday for the past 3 years. She slid her security card through the reader, nodding politely to the guard as she entered the still quiet building. The 45th floor was empty, lights automatically brightening as she made her way to her desk outside the corner office of Dominic Reed, CEO and founder. With practiced efficiency, she powered up her computer, reviewed the day's schedule, and prepared the files Dominic would need for his 9 a.m. meeting with investors. Next came his morning coffee, 1 shot of espresso with exactly 1/2 teaspoon of raw sugar, placed on a coaster on the right side of his desk, where he would expect to find it. By the time the elevator doors opened at 8:15 to admit the first wave of employees, Vivian had already answered 12 emails, confirmed 3 appointments, and drafted a memo about quarterly projections. Invisibility, Vivian had learned, was both an art and a science. Her wardrobe consisted of muted colors, navy, beige, charcoal, professional but forgettable. Her auburn hair remained secured in a simple chignon that kept it out of her way and drew no attention. Her makeup was minimal, just enough to look polished without being noticeable. At 32, she had mastered the art of being essential yet overlooked. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell." Dominic Reed's voice carried its usual crisp authority as he strode past her desk at exactly 8:45, right on schedule. At 38, he cut an imposing figure in his bespoke suits and perpetually serious expression, with dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples and sharp features that rarely softened into a smile. Dominic embodied the stereotypical ruthless executive. Hawthorne Enterprises had thrived under his leadership, expanding from a modest consulting firm to a global business solutions provider worth billions. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," Vivian replied, rising to follow him into his office with her tablet ready. "Your coffee is on your desk. The investor presentation has been updated with the latest figures from accounting. I've moved your lunch with Mr. Peterson to 1 p.m. to accommodate his flight delay. And legal sent over the Daniels contract for your review before tomorrow's signing." Dominic nodded absently as he settled behind his imposing desk, already scanning the first document in the neat stack she had prepared. "The Singapore office called about the Matthews merger? I spoke with them at 7. The paperwork is proceeding on schedule, and I've arranged for a video conference at 6 p.m. our time to address their concerns about staffing integration." Another nod, this one with the faintest hint of approval. "What about the charity gala next week? Your tuxedo has been pressed, car service arranged, and I've prepared talking points for your conversation with Mayor Bennett about the downtown development project. They're in your email." For a brief moment, Dominic looked up from his papers, his steel gray eyes meeting hers directly, something that happened rarely enough to be noticeable. "You've handled everything as usual." It wasn't exactly a compliment, more an acknowledgement of expected performance, but Vivian accepted it with a professional smile. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Reed?" "That's all for now." Dismissed, Vivian returned to her desk, already mentally processing the dozen tasks that awaited her attention. She was halfway through drafting a press release when her desk phone rang. "Dominic Reed's office, this is Vivian Mitchell speaking." "Vivian, it's Tessa from Unheard. I need that benefits summary for the board meeting tomorrow. Do you have it handy?" "Just sent it to your inbox," Vivian replied, having anticipated the request yesterday. "You're a lifesaver, as always," Tessa laughed. "Seriously, this company would collapse without you. How's the dragon today?" Vivian glanced toward Dominic's closed door before responding in a lowered voice, focused. 3 cups of coffee already, so approach with caution." Tessa was one of the few people at Hawthorne who treated Vivian as more than just an extension of Dominic Reed. They had started around the same time, and while Tessa had risen to head of human resources, she never adopted the subtle condescension other executives showed toward support staff. Noted, "Hey, we should grab lunch this week. I haven't seen you outside these walls in ages." "That would be nice," Vivian agreed. Though both women knew the likelihood of her getting a proper lunch break was slim, Dominic's demands typically left her eating salad at her desk while managing his correspondence. The morning progressed with its usual relentless pace. At 11:30, Dominic emerged from his office, straightening his already perfect tie. "I'm heading to the conference room for the Davidson meeting. Bring the Singapore files in 10 minutes, and be prepared to take detailed notes." "Of course," Vivian replied, though he was already walking away, attention focused on his phone. The Davidson meeting involved potential investors from Australia, and Vivian spent 90 minutes recording every question, response, and subtle reaction while remaining essentially invisible to the participants. Occasionally, Dominic would glance her way, a silent signal that he needed a particular document or piece of information, which she would provide without disrupting the flow of conversation. By 3 p.m., the investors had departed seemingly impressed, and the executive team dispersed to their respective offices. Vivian remained in the conference room, organizing her notes while Dominic spoke privately with James Woodward, Hawthorne's chief financial officer, and Dominic's closest ally in the company. Their voices carried from the other end of the room where they stood near the windows. "Impressive presentation," James was saying. "Those Australians were practically ready to write checks on the spot." "Let's hope so," Dominic replied. "We need their capital for the Asian expansion." "Speaking of impressive," James continued, lowering his voice slightly, "how do you manage to keep your assistant so extraordinarily efficient?" "Mitchell never misses a detail. My Jeffrey can barely manage my calendar without 3 reminders." Vivian froze, pen poised over her notebook. She should announce her presence or leave immediately. But curiosity held her in place. What would Dominic say about her work? In 3 years, he had never offered more than the most perfunctory acknowledgement of her contributions. "Vivian is reliable," Dominic said after a brief pause, "completely devoted to her job. I never have to worry about things falling through the cracks." "You're understating it," James chuckled. "The woman is a machine. Though I must say, she does blend into the background rather effectively. I barely notice her in meetings." "That's precisely what makes her valuable," Dominic replied coolly. "She's not trying to draw attention or advance herself. No drama, no distractions, just consistent performance. You know how many assistants I went through before her? Attractive women who spent more time networking or flirting than actually working." James laughed. "True enough. Still, it must be refreshing to have someone so plain handling your affairs. No risk of office complications there." There was a slight pause before Dominic responded. "Exactly. She knows her place in the organization. That kind of clarity is rare and worth keeping around." The words landed like individual blows. Plain. Knows her place. Worth keeping around like a reliable appliance. Vivian's chest tightened as she realized how Dominic truly saw her. Not as a skilled professional, but as a convenient tool, valued precisely because she was forgettable. With trembling hands, she gathered her materials and rose quietly from her seat. Neither man noticed as she slipped out the side door of the conference room, their conversation already turning to quarterly projections. Back at her desk, Vivian stared at her computer screen, the familiar email interface suddenly seeming alien. 3 years of arriving early and leaving late, countless weekends sacrificed to emergency projects, holidays interrupted by Dominic's calls, all because she believed her work mattered, that her competence was recognized even if not openly praised. How many times had she declined invitations from friends, postponed dating, put her own life on hold to ensure that Dominic Reed's professional world ran smoothly? And for what? To be dismissed as plain but useful. Someone who conveniently knew her place? As if on cue, her desk phone rang. Dominic requesting she join him in the conference room with the Asian market projections they had discussed yesterday. She answered with her usual professional tone, giving no indication of what she had overheard. "Right away, Mr. Reed." But as she gathered the requested documents, Vivian caught her reflection in the darkened screen of her phone. The severe hairstyle, the muted blouse, the carefully neutral expression she had cultivated to become the perfect professional backdrop. Dominic Reed might see her as merely functional, but perhaps it was time she remembered that she was much more than just his assistant. With that thought firmly in mind, she straightened her shoulders and headed back to the conference room, already planning what would come next. Vivian's transformation began subtly the next Monday. She arrived at work with her auburn hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual tight chignon. Her customary beige blouse had been replaced by a deep emerald, silk that brought out the green in her hazel eyes. The changes continued throughout the week, small adjustments to her appearance that reflected the woman she'd been before Hawthorne Enterprises. Navy pencil skirts gave way to tailored trousers in burgundy. Practical flats were exchanged for modest heels tee. Friday evening found her in a cocktail dress she hadn't worn in years, midnight blue with a subtle shimmer that caught the light as she moved. Her hair fell in soft waves, and for the first time in recent memory, she felt visible in the best possible way. The Continental Hotel's ballroom buzzed with marketing executives, tech innovators, and investment specialists, Vivian recognized several of Dominic's business associates who seemed surprised to see her outside her usual context. "You work for Reed, right?" asked Philip Garrison, a venture capitalist who frequently met with Dominic. "Didn't recognize you at first." "Vivian Mitchell." "Mr. Reed's executive assistant," she confirmed, extending her hand professionally. "Well, you clean up nicely," Garrison remarked with a smile that lingered too long. "Always thought you were just part of the furniture in those meetings." Before Vivian could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. "Any executive who views their assistant as furniture probably isn't paying attention to important details elsewhere." Vivian turned to find a man she didn't recognize, tall with warm brown eyes and an expression of genuine interest. "Benjamin Foster," he introduced himself, offering his hand. "Foster Marketing Solutions." "Vivian Mitchell," she replied, appreciating his timely intervention. Garrison made a hasty excuse and departed, leaving Vivian with her unexpected defender. "Thank you for that," she said, "though I could have handled it." Benjamin smiled. "I have no doubt, but sometimes it's nice not to have to, isn't it?" "New perspectives, you're late," Dominic observed coldly when Vivian arrived at 8:15 Monday morning, having spent extra time on her appearance after a restless night. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she replied calmly. "Your coffee is on your desk and the conference call with Tokyo is confirmed for 9:30. If he noticed her new confidence or the crimson blouse that complemented her complexion, he gave no indication. But something had shifted in their dynamic, a tension that hadn't existed before. Throughout the morning, Dominic seemed unusually aware of her movements, his eyes following her with an unfamiliar intensity. Twice he requested her presence for tasks he typically handled alone, and during the Tokyo call he frequently glanced in her direction. At noon, Vivian's phone chimed with a text message from Benjamin. "Still on for coffee tomorrow? 2 p.m. at Stella's?" She smiled as she typed her response, unaware that Dominic had emerged from his office and was watching her. "Personal matters should be handled on personal time," he remarked, his tone clipped. Vivian looked up, meeting his gaze directly. It was a brief message that didn't interfere with my work. "Mr. Reed, the quarterly reports are already on your desk, and I've rescheduled the Peterson meeting as requested." Dominic seemed taken aback by her calm response. Before he could reply, Tessa appeared with lunch, clearly a deliberate rescue mission. "I hope you don't mind if I steal Vivian for 30 minutes, she said cheerfully. HR business to discuss. Over sandwiches in Tessa's office, Vivian described Benjamin's job offer. "You should absolutely explore it," Tessa insisted. "Foster Marketing has an excellent reputation, and Benjamin Foster is considered one of the good guys in the industry." "It would mean leaving Hawthorne," Vivian mused. "Leaving Dominic," Tessa finished for her, "who, may I remind you, sees you as office furniture." The following afternoon, Vivian informed Dominic she needed to step out for a meeting. His eyebrows rose at the unprecedented request. "What kind of meeting?" "Personal," she replied simply. His jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Stella's cafe was only a few blocks from Hawthorne Enterprises. Benjamin was already waiting, his smile warming when he spotted her. Their conversation flowed easily from professional opportunities to personal interests, revealing shared passions for historical fiction and hiking. "I'd like you to meet our team," Benjamin said as they finished their coffee. "How about lunch next week? I can pick you up at your office." Vivian agreed before fully considering the implications. She didn't have to wait long to discover them. The next morning, Dominic called her into his office immediately upon arrival. "Who were you meeting yesterday?" he asked without preamble. Vivian blinked in surprise. "I wasn't aware I needed to provide details about personal appointments." "You don't," Dominic conceded, his expression unreadable. "Unless they interfere with your responsibilities here." "My work has been completed to the same standard it always has been," Vivian pointed out. "Is there a specific concern about my performance?" Dominic seemed momentarily at a loss, an unprecedented occurrence. "No," he admitted finally. "Your performance remains adequate. Adequate. After years of exceptional service." Vivian nodded politely and returned to her desk, more certain than ever that exploring Benjamin's offer was the right decision. The following Tuesday, Benjamin arrived at Hawthorne Enterprises precisely at noon. Vivian was gathering her purse when Dominic emerged from his office, stopping abruptly at the sight of the visitor. "Mr. Reed," Vivian said professionally, "this is Benjamin Foster of Foster Marketing Solutions." Benjamin, this is Dominic Reed, CEO of Hawthorne Enterprises. The two men sized each other up with the instinctive wariness of territorial animals. Foster Marketing, Dominic repeated. You're pitching the Southgate development. Benjamin nodded. We are. Though today I'm just having lunch with Vivian. Dominic's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. Vivian is essential to several projects here. I trust you won't keep her long. The proprietary tone was new and Vivian felt a flash of indignation. I'll be back by 1:30, Mr. Reed, she said firmly. As we discussed. As she left with Benjamin, Vivian could feel Dominic's gaze following them to the elevator. And for the first time, she wondered if what she saw in his eyes might actually be jealousy. Part 4. Recognition and Realization. Week following her lunch with Benjamin brought subtle but significant changes to Vivian's work environment. Dominic began finding reasons to be at her desk. Questions that could have been emailed, documents that suddenly needed immediate review, coffee cups that apparently could only be delivered personally. More surprisingly, he started noticing things, commenting on a presentation she had prepared, asking about her weekend, even complimenting her handling of a difficult client. After years of functional invisibility, the attention was both gratifying and suspicious. Benjamin, meanwhile, had formally offered her the Director of Operations position at Foster Marketing, complete with a substantial salary increase, equity options, and a level of professional recognition Hawthorne had never provided. Think about it, he'd said warmly. We'd love to have you join us, but I understand it's a big decision. What Benjamin didn't know, what no one knew, was how complicated that decision had become. Despite everything, Vivian found herself reluctant to leave Hawthorne, or more specifically to leave Dominic on Thursday afternoon. Vivian was preparing the monthly analytics report when Dominic appeared beside her desk. I need to discuss something with you, he said, his voice over the next hour. They talked easily about industry trends, marketing strategies, and the challenges of corporate culture. Benjamin listened attentively to her insights, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely impressed by her knowledge of business operations. You're wasted as an assistant, he observed as they shared dessert at one of the high-top tables. With your understanding of corporate strategy, you should be in management. Vivian laughed. That would require my boss to see me as more than a scheduling device with legs. His loss, Benjamin said simply. My company is actually looking for a director of operations. Someone who understands how all the pieces fit together, someone like you. When she returned home that night, Vivian found herself smiling at her reflection. Benjamin had asked for her number, suggesting coffee to discuss the position further. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not just as an efficient assistant, but as a capable professional with ideas and potential. Little did she know that on Monday morning, everything would change. Hesitant. In my office, please. Vivian followed him, notebook in hand, expecting a business matter. Instead, Dominic closed the door and turned to face her with uncharacteristic uncertainty. I understand you've been offered a position at Foster Marketing, he said abruptly. Vivian's eyes widened. How did you— This is a small industry, he interrupted. People talk. Are you planning to accept? I'm considering it, she admitted, seeing no point in denial. It's an excellent opportunity. Dominic paced behind his desk, his usual composure visibly fraying. What would it take for you to stay at Hawthorne? The directness of the question caught her off guard. I didn't realize you valued my contribution enough to negotiate. Dominic stopped pacing, his expression shifting from surprise to something like realization. Of course I value. Vivian, Hawthorne functions because of your work. That's not the impression I've received, she replied quietly. In fact, I distinctly recall being described as plain but useful because I know my place. Dominic paled. You heard that conversation with James. I did. I didn't mean— He struggled uncharacteristically. It was a stupid, thoughtless comment, not reflective of your actual value to this company, to me. Vivian studied him, seeing genuine discomfort in the man who was never ruffled by multi-million-dollar negotiations. What changed, Dominic? You never noticed me before. Now suddenly you can't bear the thought of me leaving. I always noticed you, he said quietly. I just didn't realize how much until I saw you with Foster. Until I imagined Hawthorne, my life, without you in it. The admission hung between them, neither fully professional nor entirely personal. "I've been invisible here for 3 years," Vivian said finally. "I need more than last-minute recognition prompted by jealousy or fear of inconvenience." Dominic nodded slowly, something new in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or genuine regret. "Tell me what you need," he said simply, "and I'll make it happen." Part 5. Rewritten terms 3 months later. Vivian stood at the window of her new office on the 44th floor of Hawthorne Enterprises, watching the city lights emerge as dusk settled over the skyline. The Director of Operational Development nameplate on her door still felt slightly surreal, as did the team of 4 professionals who now reported to her. Her transformation, both personal and professional, had been more comprehensive than she could have imagined on that September afternoon when she overheard Dominic's dismissive comments. "Quarterly projections," announced Dominic from her doorway holding a file folder. "For your review before the board presentation." Vivian smiled, gesturing him in. "That's a reversal. Usually I was bringing you these files." "Role reversal seems to be working for Hawthorne," he observed, placing the folder on her desk. "Stock is up 12% since your promotion, and client retention has improved significantly under your new operational model. The relationship between them had evolved into something neither could have anticipated, a partnership of equals based on mutual respect." Dominic had not only created a new executive position for her, but had publicly credited her with innovations she'd been quietly implementing for years. "Benjamin Foster called," Dominic mentioned, his tone carefully neutral. "Wants to know if you'd consider a joint project between our companies." Vivian nodded, appreciating his effort at casualness. She and Benjamin had maintained a friendly professional relationship, occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss industry trends. Whatever romantic potential might have existed had been complicated by her decision to stay at Hawthorne, a choice Benjamin understood, but had obviously hoped would go differently. "I think there's potential there," she replied. "Foster Marketing has complementary strengths to our strategy division." Dominic nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Dinner tonight? To discuss the possibilities?" There was more than business in the question. There had been for weeks now, as their after-hours strategy sessions gradually evolved into conversations that extended far beyond Hawthorne Enterprises. "I'd like that," Vivian answered simply. As Dominic left her office, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had needed to become visible to herself before anyone else could truly see her. The realization that she deserved recognition had been the first step toward actually receiving it. Dominic had changed too, learning to acknowledge the contributions of others, to express appreciation rather than just expectation. Whether their evolving relationship would develop into something more personal remained to be seen. But the foundation of respect was firmly established. Vivian returned to the quarterly projections, confident in her expertise and her value. No longer invisible, no longer overlooked, she had rewritten the terms of her professional existence. And in doing so, had changed not only her own story, but Dominic's as well. Some transformations, she had discovered, created ripple effects far beyond what anyone could anticipate. And sometimes being truly seen was worth the risk of stepping out of the shadows.